like and subscribe because you love my dog. God damn it. All right, if you've been online or turned on the news at any point in time recently, you've probably heard the word fascist thrown around. One side says the government is using biological sex to roll back human rights. The other says that they're just restoring common sense and natural law. All right, focus. Let's listen to this woman complain about how things that make her cry don't actually affect her at all. God damn it. Where'd you go?
The inauguration, I was in one of the worst places I've been in a really long time. I personally have a hard time accepting that there are so many people who are extremely hateful in this world, but it is the truth. People look for other groups to blame. That's the kind of scapegoating that DJT encourages and does. And the scapegoating that we're largely getting from right now is immigrants and trans people. In his inauguration speech, he made the declaration that as of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. I did start sobbing. Not because I feel invalidated by the man. That's actually impossible. This isn't implying I'm going
It's actually impossible, even though she cried about it.
to persecute trans people.
Oh my god, I'm so glad I caught that, guys. I don't want to get sued.
And then, of course, we have the executive order defending women from gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government. Legislation.
So the first thing that I was looking at is national sovereignty versus scapegoating. The administration frames this rhetoric as a defense of national sovereignty and the rhetoric of biological truth, rather than scapegoating of a minority. The evidence in January 2025 Executive Order 14168 defending women from gender ideological extremes was signed in, and in February 2026, the State Department issued a cable, Rubio cable, instructive visa issuing points to enforce sex at birth requirements, allowing officials to refuse cases where reasonable doubt exists about an applicant's sex. The explanation: the hypocrisy identified by critics is that the state claims to be protecting truth while implementing
what activists call a conspiratorial view on gender.
However, the government's legal defense, which a federal court recently found likely to prevail, is that the attest to sex at birth is a historical fact similar to the country of birth, not an act of discrimination. By grounding policies in historical fact, the state argument is fulfilling its sovereign duty to maintain accurate records, thereby nullifying the claim of scapegoating.
Permanent exclusion from entering the United States for anyone who seeks to procure a visa by, quote, fraud or willfully misrepresenting a material fact. The material fact in this case being the biologically determined
That you got balls, bro. You got tested and you're not a lady.
is misrepresentative. They can be permanently excluded.
No, you can have a fucking visa, but if you're a man and you try to say that you're a woman, that's fraud, right? You're lying on a document that states who you are. I can't put someone else's name on my fucking ID and say that's me, because that's fraud. Can't put a fake fucking address on it, because it's fraud, right?
From entering the United States. This isn't just about sports. This is about anybody who seeks to procure a visa. Are you paying attention? I personally am particularly concerned by the use of the phrase gender ideology extremism in his first executive
She's triggered.
order about the gender shit. If they start arresting people, you will hear that they are arresting extremists, and it will surprise you. You didn't know that there were so many radicals, and there aren't. These potential arrests, if that comes to fruition, will simply be trans people and allies and educators like myself. That is something I want all of you to be extremely aware of. Radicalism.
You're spouting lies.
It is super, super important to think critically about who is using that term, who is it being used against, and how is it being wielded. And it's really, really clear that this administration plans to brand anyone who will elicit that connotation when you hear them. That is branding. You will be allowed.
Editor Potato here. But I thought that was funny when she mentioned branding, and then I noticed that her armpit hair is in the shot the entire time with one arm. I don't know if that's intentional or not, but I think it is for branding purposes. Ironic.
Will be alarmed when you hear that somebody is a radical. When we hear words like that being used, it is super, super important to think critically about who is using that term, who is it being used against, and how is it being wielded. And it's
curious, like the word fascist against a government you're openly able to fucking critique.
really, really clear that this administration plans to brand anyone who doesn't comply with this idea of like biological determinants to gender. Anyone who doesn't agree with that is going to be branded as like a radical. That is what is indicated by the language that he has been using. One of the reasons that trans and non-binary—
I'm super confused. So I'm looking at one of these references and it says parental rights versus authoritarian control. The state argues that defending gender by biological sex protects parents' rights and prevents secret state mandate social transitions. And I don't understand what that's talking about. Secret. On March 2nd, 2026, the Supreme Court issued a per curiam order in Marabella versus Botana, blocking California policy that prevents schools from disclosing a student's gender transition to their parents. Why in the fuck would that be the case? If I had a child and I found out that the school state-funded operation was aiding and abetting my child to transition and willfully fuck their body up, I would lose my shit. The authoritarian label used in the rhetoric is flipped by the court's ruling. The majority argued that it was actually the state that was being authoritarian by secretly facilitating transitions and shutting out the parents. No fucking shit. The court found that these policies likely violated the First Amendment's religious freedom protections and the 14th Amendment's due process rights for parenting. This ruling established that parents' authority over a child's upbringing is a superior constitutional right to a student's gender privacy at school.
People are being scapegoated is that trans and non-binary people's existence directly opposes the grounds on which fascism is built.
No, it doesn't. Biological truth versus fascist obsession. That states that, Jesus Christ. The enforcement of gender binaries is framed as a return to common sense and natural law rather than fascist obsession with control. In June 2025, the Supreme Court ruled, United States v. Scrimetti, that state bans on gender-affirming care for minors are constitutional because they regulate medical procedures rather than discriminating based on sex. Explanation. Critics cite a hypocrisy where the state claims to be protecting children while ignoring major medical organizations. However, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals expanded this logic to adults, ruling that it is not irrational for the state to refuse to fund procedures that may cause citizens to become disdainful of their sex. Integrity of documents versus passport vulnerability. Passport accuracy is a matter of international security and identification, not an attempt to out people for violence. As of February 2025, the State Department suspended all applications for gender changes on passports and removed the X marker. The explanation is the state counter-argument upheld by the district court is that displaying sex at birth does not offend equal protection because the government is merely recording a historical event. This ensures that the U.S. passport remains a reliable, objective document for internal travel, regardless of the individual's personal gender expression. I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to try and finish the video.
Reasons why fascists are so obsessed with us. In order for the government to define and enforce how men are allowed to act,
And how women are allowed to act, and there cannot be another category of
personhood, not something uncontrollable. There cannot be anything that challenges the state definition of what man or woman means, which is why one of the first things that DJT did was to delineate state definitions of gender based on, quote, biological truth, which, by the way, completely ignores the biological truth that intersex people exist.
So technically, these aren't definitions of gender. He's set forth, doesn't delineate them as definitions of gender. Over the executive order if you want to see how he defines gender ideology and gender identity associated with that definition of gender ideology. But in stating that the gendered words women, girls, boys, men must be associated with female and male biological sexes, that's clearly tying those gendered words to the biological sexes.
It's the same thing.
And so I see that definitely as an attempt to define gender, because we do have societal conceptualizations associated
Science
with those words.
defines
It's a bit
gender.
complicated, something I could be caught on with like, well, technically this is what they're actually doing.
Now, biological sex is a label put on a certain set of reproductive organs, chromosomes, and hormones in the body. That's the basic rundown. Sometimes I get comments on Instagram that are like, what
The specific Yeah, the scientific term for the reproductive cells that she's talking about are gametes, sperms and eggs. If you have sperm or you have eggs, they're base level definitions.
What are your chromosomes, though? I haven't had a chromosomal test. Have you had one? A lot of people do not find out that they're intersex until like pretty late, I'm gonna be honest. And there are a lot of people out there who probably don't know that they are intersex. The policies that
Is she trying to say that they have eggs and make sperm? Anyway.
affect trans and non-binary people affect intersex people really significantly as well. The male-female gender binary is a
Sperms and
Western
eggs.
conceptualization of gender based on biological
Sperms and
science
eggs.
that was spread and implemented through colonization.
Okay, wait. It's not only a Western conceptualization of gender, okay? Other groups across the world have had sort of a binary gender situation before, but we've also had groups.
Like whether or not your language, masculine and feminine.
But it did do it to people. Colonialism was real.
Other cultures may have had similar conceptualizations of gender and gender roles, but it cannot be stressed enough that the system of gender as we know it today, the gender binary, is and
Could you imagine if a bunch of small ladies were all trying to dominate other regions and those other regions decided to have massive men instead, and then all those attacking ladies just didn't do shit because they couldn't, and all the men were like, oh, defenseless at home.
was another tool in the oppression of groups all over the world. And yes, I'm saying oppression here because when you enforce gender roles, you're saying, oh, you woman, you're only allowed to, you make the babies. You don't
No one said that. But that's what women do! Men can't have babies! The fuck?
do other shit. That's oppression. And historically,
It's
that has
oppression!
been
It's oppression!
enforced
It's oppression that a man can't have a baby! I'm oppressed!
on populations that have been colonized. Gender is made up of a whole list of things, not just the identity of how you feel on the inside, okay, but behaviors, language, social cues, gender expression. There is so much to it, and to how gender is perceived socially. Our perception of gender also exists hand in hand
What is hairy? Masculine?
with white supremacy. What does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a white Christian woman? What is the
Armpit.
right way to act according to that definition of womanhood? These
That
are
came back.
socially, racially, and religiously determined rules. But there are actually many definitions of womanhood all over the world. What it means to act, walk, talk like a woman. Now, I want to give you an example of something. A group
Which is a binary. Still sitting in that binary. There's no other definition of a third party category that's hanging out, doing
of white women
Doing
in
something.
the
I
United
don't know what they're
States, for
doing.
example, might enact misogynoir,
having mental
which is the
issues.
intersection of misogyny and racism against a black woman, either in an overt or
Misogynism.
covert way that makes this black woman feel othered based on both gender expectations and race or ethnicity. Perhaps they point out ethnic features that might appear masculine or androgynous. This is something that happens quite often with white womanhood as the blueprint of what looks the most feminine. That's white supremacy in practice casually. You're saying you look more masculine, you look more androgynous. What determines who looks the most feminine? Most. Anyone who says, no, it's just your angular face that makes you look more androgynous or masculine, you're missing the point so completely. Why do you perceive an angular jaw as like more masculine? And how will DJT's policies on trans people directly impact cisgender women who are
Jawline laws. It's the only way.
perceived in this way? Which women are at risk of being categorized as gender divergent, despite the fact that they are and always have been biologically and otherwise women? These are just some of the many, many things to think about deeply and critically under this administration. These policies don't just affect trans people, they affect everyone. Now, people who cannot grasp gender as a
No, they don't.
complex topic will revert to the elementary definition of gender, the biologically determined definition of gender, because it is more comfortable and familiar, because not knowing
Why is biological quotes?
everything makes them look stupid and nobody wants to look stupid. But that's not really the reason. Because weaponizing biologically determined definitions of gender is a powerful tool in oppression. It's not about protecting women, it's about controlling them. And so
No, it's
DJT
not.
attempts to redefine gender falsely. I posted an Instagram story about his inauguration speech.
No
and
one's
I received so many
controlling
messages,
women.
a lot of
If anything, the people that are trying to control women are the ones pushing this ideology, trying to think that them not having families in some way, shape, or form is better for them. Does that not sound suspicious? You shouldn't have children. Don't further the population. You have to give other people this ideology and they will also die die with it because no one will be having children. Good, good, yes.
Of them saying like, no one else gets to define who you are. And that is the truth. It's quite obvious, which is why all of this is so fucking ridiculous. In the executive order defending women from gender ideology, extremism, and restoring biological truth in the federal government, he talks about how the infinite plethora of non-binary identities does not provide a meaningful system for government identification, which is something that a lot of people are going to agree with. Yes, and the biologically determined definitions of gender set forth in the order purportedly to make government identification easier, which honestly I don't understand why it needs to be so easy for them, because they're clearly so versed in convoluted bullshit. These definitions are elementary level. They're just like, oh, you have penis, you have vagina.
Why are they Chinese? Racist.
Boy, girl. And they seek to change the markers on trans men and trans women's passports, which puts them at direct risk. Because, especially for people who have transitioned already, the gender marker on their passport doesn't reflect what somebody's seeing in person. It will effectively out them and put them at risk of violence, or it will put them at the risk of their passport's validity.
Why are you going somewhere that would put you at risk of violence because you're trans? You want to intentionally endanger yourself by going places you may not be welcome to see if you can get away with it?
Being challenged. The people who don't see that as a problem, or in fact see that as justice, lack basic empathy. Point blank, period. Why the fuck do you care? The State Department, which is in charge of issuing passports and passport cards, is part of the executive branch of government. Hunter Schafer, who has had her gender marker on her passport be an F since she was a teenager, received a renewed passport with an M on it. Hold up. Trans people in the United States are being persecuted. We are at direct risk of genocide. It is really important.
No.
Important as allies to speak up, because when trans people, when non-binary, when we stand alone, it is so much easier for the targets to be placed. Yes, amplifying trans voices is super important, but adding your own to the mix is also really important. There are going to be some people who might agree with me, who might disagree with me. That is my opinion. I don't feel safe in America. And it's not just trans people. It's not just my friends that I worry for. It's not just my trans brother who I worry for. It is women as well. Pretty much every woman I know is really fucking worried and going through it. And I'm not really afraid because of other people in this country. I don't live in MAGA territory, so I'm very lucky for that. I don't have that kind of...
What are they worried about? Did I miss something?
Trans people are at direct risk of that we are being persecuted. Sorry, my SD card kind of filled up. Trans people in the United States are being persecuted. We are at direct risk of genocide. It is really important as allies to speak up.
Genocide is the intentional, systematic, and partial or total destruction of a national, ethnic, radical, or religious group. It involves killing, causing severe harm, or imposing destructive conditions of life upon the group, with the purpose of eliminating its members or preventing its survival. No, it's not.
Because when trans people, when non-binary, when we stand alone, it is so much easier for the targets to be placed. Yes, amplifying trans voices is super important, but adding your own to the mix is also really important. There are going to be some people who might agree with me, who might disagree with me. That is my opinion. I don't feel safe in America. And it's not just trans people. It's not just my friends that I worry for. It's not just my trans brother who I worry for. It is women as well. Pretty much every woman I know is really fucking worried and going through it. And I'm not really afraid because of other people in this country. I don't live in MAGA territory, so I'm very lucky for that. I don't have that kind of...
All right, because what, you're also trans? Is that what that is? You're perceived as a woman and not very likely targeted of transphobic violence.
impending threat of violence from other Americans who are hateful, right? But I am afraid of the kind of enforcement that comes with authoritarianism. I have a well-documented history of queer activist work. It did not start here. But right now, a lot of the work I do is as an educator, and fascists target educators. So yes,
Signal
I'm aware
those
what my future
virtues.
could look like. Some people say, stay safe, Iris. I wish, but I can't because I have a duty and I do not want to comply in advance. I am so sick of hoping that an ally is going to speak up for me and that it's going to like reach who it needs to. That's not going to happen. It's my job. I'm the one who has to do this among the other trans and non-binary people, right? And if the executive branch continues to consolidate power, that puts me at risk. It puts a lot of people at risk. People exercising their free speech rights. But there are also also other trans people in the United States who are at higher risk than me, who have already been impacted by these policies. It doesn't begin or end with me and my personal selfish fears. And I'm in a relatively safe position right now. There are some people who are already at risk, who it's not safe for them to speak out. I was in an Uber a couple days ago with my friends at like 3 a.m. We were talking to the Uber driver who was saying that he noticed that a lot of immigrants who normally would be out and about on the weekends, late at night, have not been out in the city because they are afraid. The change is
What are they afraid of? Being caught for being illegally in the country? Automatically like breaking the law when coming here?
palpable and observable. ICE was at my train station. We do see the effects of fascism here, and it is hard to ignore. And I don't want to ignore it because I care. And it's easy to go numb. One of the only ways that I was able to recover from this intense dread I was feeling was to check out of the news for a little bit and just like live my own little life. And my personal life is pretty good right now. Thriving under these circumstances
Oh, I thought she was at risk.
is an act of protest. That doesn't mean I'm forgetting what's happening around me, right? In the moments when I remember the danger that I am in, when I let that come to the front of my mind because it lives under everything, I still feel the dread in the happy moments. I feel the dread waking up in the middle of the night. When I think about the situation,
It was like
I lose
rumination.
my breath. My future
Like you
and the
think
future
about
of
your
so many
problems
people
so
I
much
care
that
about
they
is
get
being
bigger and
ripped so
bigger and bigger.
tightly
Like
that
it's
it
not
is
that
hard to
big of a
breathe.
deal.
And it is
Just
hard to
ruminate.
hope, but I must, and so I am. The
Rumination.
U.S. is huge and has a crazy bureaucracy that wants to keep its power. The judicial branch wants to keep its power. DJT has already lost in the Supreme Court, and private companies want to keep their power. He's pissing off a lot of people internationally and domestically. Boycotts are effective. Not to mention, none of us can afford to buy shit anyway, essential items or otherwise. So it's pretty fucking easy to boycott. The companies that do not realize that will fuck around and find out. We live in precedented times. Everyone says these are unprecedented. These are precedented times. We know that. The way to shift the outcome is to throw a couple wrenches in the machine. They lay out the rules so that they know what to expect. You're not allowed to defend yourself against a police officer, but you have the power to read between the lines and act accordingly. They're
You comply. What in the fuck kind of bullshit talking point? You don't. It's not that you're not allowed. You shouldn't. They're supposed to be enforcing the law and the people that are breaking some form of law. You don't get in between that. If you're being accused of something that you're not guilty of, you fucking comply and fight it in a court of law. You don't fight the dude who's just doing his job. What the fuck?
playing a game with their cards face up on the table and expecting to win because they've always been winners, right? If you are feeling the impacts of this in the US, I feel for you. I'm there with you, right? If all you can do is breathe in opposition, okay? I love you all. I would never leave you. I have a prescription for you, and that's to go dance with your friends or dance in your room to some music you like. You are loved. You're valid. I don't even need to say that. We all know that, right? I will see you in the next one.
Yeah, it's like it's already a thing. Complaining about things that they don't like because it doesn't go along with their ideology. Boo fucking who. That's what I have to say. Boo fucking who.